Good afternoon again, everyone. If we can have your attention, that would be fabulous. As we touched on earlier, it certainly has been a spectacular year for sport. But what do we need to do to foster, grow and sustain women's sport here in Australia? And what will be the secrets to success to make opportunities equitable for players and our audience? Behind every great player, club or championship, there are professionals guiding the way when it comes to marketing, coaching, strategy and commercial decisions. Please join me in welcoming up here on the stage Aisha Ward, General Manager of AFLW Essendon, Peter Webster, General Manager Commercial AFL, Taya Bott, Chief Marketing Officer Melbourne Storm and the Sunshine Coast Lightning Netball, and Maddie Prespakis, Bombers star. Are we on? Yeah, here we are. Peter, we might start with you and get right into the nitty-gritty of things. To begin with, commercial sponsorships obviously play such a vital role in funding clubs and players, but how do we continue to grow the investment, particularly when things are in the early stages?
Well, basically it's all underlined by creating visibility, and really it's by creating visibility through, through advocacy. And that is really underpinned by making sure the product is as good as it can be all of the time. And when I say the product, I talk about at match and on-field and off-field, but also it's around also making sure that we're creating opportunities for our current partners and also new partner opportunities. So if I talk about at-match experience, we're talking on the field, we've got to make sure for people to come and stay and enjoy, for those that love the football, we need to make sure that it's high scoring and it's close matches. I'm sure, Maddie, you probably don't want the close matches, but for the fans and for the people watching on TV and at match, we've got to make sure it's our responsibility that we tweak the rules and do things to make sure it's interesting when you're there. But if you're not an avid fan, we've got to make sure the experience at match is really fun. So this year more than ever, we've actually lent in and worked really closely with all the clubs to create a real festival experience. So if you're actually not an AFL fan, but you want to come along on a Saturday, Sunday and have a good time, it's around creating that experience. It's a real festival. We've got things for kids, things for the social seekers, go along to the gin bar or the Ferris wheel for the kids, etc. So it's creating this opportunity for people to come along and talk to others and say, how good was that, going along and enjoying the experience. When it comes to our partners, it's all about just continuing to create value for them. And it's not by doing it through the same way in which we do it with the men's. So we can't just pick up what we do as a sponsorship with our partners, with the men's. We've got to think really differently. So it's a real creative overlay. And it's also going and actually speaking to partners that perhaps wouldn't normally be a partner of sport, or particularly with the men's. But 3 new partners that we got on board last year, really different non-endemic type brands. So John Hollander Construction Company, Coates Hire and BHP are 3 of our new partners or big partners on AFLW. And it's through them then actually being involved with the AFLW for different reasons. So it's not your traditional reach, grass signage, all of those things that they might want to do. It's actually creating programs for them that are actually allowing them to tell their stories through AFL and AFLW. And also it's just through storytelling and through the consumer. So we create merchandise. So if you're not going to the games, you're not watching the games, we still need a touch point for people to be hearing about AFLW. So it's creating, merchandise. We've got really cool merchandise this year that's real streetwear. It's also through membership, making sure that there's 1.2 million members for the men's program. We need to get all those people, a member of the AFLW program as well across clubs and across the AFL. And it's also through storytelling. So we need to make sure that, we're always on the news, whether it's through, our broadcast partners or whether it's through the newspapers, etc. And that's through not necessarily the AFLW fan isn't as interested in the stats and all of those things that they might be gagging to get from the men. So we've got to create the great stories about the Maddies. And there's 500 plus brilliant stories of these wonderful athletes that we can tell. So it's working really closely with our media partners to make sure that at this time of year that it is front and centre, the AFLW product.
I love what you said about merchandise. I've got two girls, a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and their bedroom's a merchandise city. They love it. If they love a team, they've got to have all the stuff. And I know it's at top of their Santa list as well. So that's a really interesting point. Taya, are there different ways in which we traditionally build the men's audience versus how we might look to build a female audience?
Yeah, I think just building on from that, definitely. I think there's a lot of learnings that we can take from a women's perspective. But, the men's code has had probably a little bit more time from a marketing perspective, and we want to take some of those learnings and apply them into a women's setting. But I also think it's important to recognise that they are different products at different stages in their life cycles. So women's sport at an elite level, we're in a newer kind of stage. So the men's game is a lot more mature, and there's a lot more opportunity for women's sport, and how we approach that is full of opportunity. And I think one part that plays a really important role for us is tradition. I don't know about all of you, but for me, I grew up in a family. My dad was a diehard Bombers supporter, so we grew up, we were Bombers supporters. We went to the footy, we had all the merch, I had the Guernsey with number 5 on the back. That's just what happened. And I think that's really important for women's sport, it is now about engaging this next generation, so that kids are seeing the heroes in front of them. They can, it's ingrained in their childhood and ingrained in their life. So I definitely think for the difference between men and women's, there's absolutely some synergies, and we want to lean on the learnings that the men's game has had, but we also want to recognise that the product is different and some of our customers are different, and that creates a new opportunity.
So what are you seeing audiences gravitate to, and what is working from a marketing perspective?
Well, I think similar to what Peter touched on, just around that storytelling piece, I think, all of the athletes across all of the women's codes at the moment have some amazing stories to tell. And it is so much more than being a footballer or a netballer or a cricketer, but about who you are as a person and how, people can relate to the players and what their interests are outside of sport. So I think that storytelling piece has been really important. And I think the other part that we've seen strong success from a netball perspective has been about getting out into the community. So really connecting kids and teens with the players, getting to know them. And I think that's where you really see that connection. And I think we live in an incredible digitally focused world, and that's important. But I think nothing beats getting out there in the community and connecting, fans with their favourite players.
I'll speak to that. My daughter's a netball obsessed, and Liz Watson came to Parkville, the State Netball Centre, about a month ago to sign copies of her new book, and the line was unbelievable. These girls all went home and they had a great day at netball, but they could tell all their friends and their family that they got to meet the Australian captain, which is a real game changer, I think, the access we have to these people. Maddie, what is the secret ingredient to getting young girls involved in sport from an early age?
Yeah, I think obviously the way that it's seen now is completely different to when I was perhaps 4 years old. Not that, I'm, out of my career
young.
and too old, but yeah, I think for me, I grew up and I was never forced to play a sport. I was never forced to do anything that I didn't want to do, but there wasn't particularly that pathway. And I started playing Aussies kick when I was 4 years old, and for me, I always said I was going to play AFL, and it wasn't an AFLW at the time, and I never shied away from the fact that that's what I wanted to do. And I was the only girl in my football team. I was the only girl at school that would play football at recess and lunch with the boys. And I think now it's completely different. You go into schools, you go into Aussies kick centres, you go into local clubs, and it's either still mixed teams or there's just girls playing in their own team. And it's completely shifted now that a girl or any a female or a male can pick whatever they want to play, and everyone can do anything they want. So I think that's the beauty of it. I love when you go watch local footy and there's an under 12 girls team now kind of riding their own journey. So it's pretty exciting, and to see how far it's come in such a short time is pretty exciting, and I think AFLW's done a great job with that stepping stone.
The choices are amazing, aren't they? I know growing up in the country, I think you could play netball or basketball or tennis as a girl and maybe do some ballet. And now the choices that my two girls have are actually quite overwhelming as a parent, the amount of options. But, what more could we want for our kids than to be able to have no obstacles in their sporting path? Aisha, you've been instrumental at growing the AFLW program here at Essendon. So on one hand, clubs are striving for the same level that the AFL guys are reaching and what they get, but at the same time we want to have a distinct identity. How important is that balance between equality but also a really distinct voice?
Yeah, I think AFLW is unique in itself, and I guess the AFL have led the way in that, in terms of how we position ourselves in the community, and it is everything we've spoken about in terms of targeting our audience, and our audience is very different to the AFL men's audience, so we have done a lot of work in that. There are a lot of women that are coming to watch other women play footy, so we are accommodating to that clientele. There are so many kids that are interested to come to the footy, so if you come into any AFLW games, it's just families galore, but that includes dads that bring their little girls as well. I think we also have to remember, though, that we're playing Aussie rules footy, so we're playing the footy that the men play as well, and although the brand of footy is different, the girls do play it differently, it's still Aussie rules footy, and there are those people that want to analyse the game and they're looking at the stats and they want to talk tactics and strategy, so how are we bringing them on the journey as well? And there's just so many of those type of footy fanatics that are attached to the men's programs and men's teams. So it's finding a way to bring them on the journey with us, and just continue building the audiences that we get at games and watching on telly. But the minute people come to games and experience that for themselves, I don't think they turn back. So it's just a matter of getting them in the doors and providing that, and I imagine it will continue to boom.
Maddie, how do you find comparisons between AFL and AFLW?
Yeah, me and Aisha were just talking about this before. I find it actually hard to answer the question sometimes, but I think, like Aisha said, we're so unique and we're so different. But yeah, we fall under the same banner. We play Aussie rules football. But yeah, people come to watch our game in a different light, and I think it's more exciting in a way. Like, we're so engaging. You know, we love getting around the fans. We love, you know, speaking to them pre-game, after game. But also it's more the family environment. You know, you bring your families along, and it's dads bringing their little girls and little boys as well. And I think that's the beauty of it, and it's creating that culture that people want to be a part of. And I think that's where it just falls a little bit different. And yeah, it's very exciting.
Taya, you have a unique dual perspective on this because you're involved with both the Melbourne Storm but also Sunshine Coast in netball, and we're seeing netball go through a little bit of a rough patch at the moment. For the AFLW girls and the implementation of AFLW, they had the might and power of the AFL and all their infrastructure, all their manpower, woman power, brain power behind the scenes to be able to make this a success. And netball doesn't have that as well. What are your thoughts on how netball can kind of lift themselves up in this situation?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and I think netball doesn't have a male code kind of working in partnership with it, so that does create some other challenges. I think it is really important to note, though, that you know, netball has been around for a really long time. So netball has a lot of great things in that. It's got a really strong participation base. It's got a really strong, you know, ingrained culture in this country. You know, how many of us grew up playing netball or that being part of our weekend? So it's almost the opposite in terms of, from an NRLW point of view, we're building, you know, it's built from the top and then we've got to build the pathways. Netball's coming from the other end where we've got the pathways and now we're building the more commercial element. So it's definitely more tricky. I think from a netball perspective, it does have this amazing position in our culture, and it is about how we, you know, take that on a fast-track trajectory. I think it is approaching it in a really different way. So we can't approach it how the AFL and the NRL are approaching it in a netball landscape. We need to get really creative. So the Melbourne Storm partnership is a perfect example of that. We're an NRL team and we now have a netball team, and we're working in partnership and we're leveraging learnings and the power of the Storm brand to come into a netball space. They've just announced a new team in the Mavericks with SEN. Again, another really different business model, partnering with a media brand like that. So I think the key for netball is going to be continuing to be creative and thinking outside the box. And that's really exciting because we've got an incredible opportunity as, you know, a really strong female brand to take that to the next level.
And the product is amazing. The girls are coming off a really successful World Cup series, Consolation Cup. They won last night as well. So, and we've seen recently there's a bit of an impasse at the moment with the Players Association and Netball Australia agreeing to a collective bargaining agreement. That to the side, we've seen the Cricketers Association chip in to have an emergency fighting fund for the girls. Now, that's pretty heartwarming to see other athletes putting it out there and supporting them financially.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's been a really incredible part of women's sport is it's not about AFLW or NRLW or netball. It is about really working, collaboratively, and we want to see all women's sport thrive. So I think, the gesture is obviously amazing from the cricket world, and I think, netball is working through negotiation. I think it's always challenging because, of course, we want better conditions for players, more pay, all those types of things, and I think it's just working through how we grow the game and improve conditions at the same time. But I also think it's great to see netball in the media. Great for it to be talked about, great for there to be more content. That's what we want. We want people hearing about it, talking about it, and, hopefully engaging with it. And I think, to some of the comments earlier, a big part of our journey in women's sport isn't just saying we like women's sport. It's playing your role. So it's coming to games. It's engaging with our content on social. It's watching us on broadcast. We need those numbers. Those metrics do matter. And I think that's another, really important message from a marketing perspective is we want to leverage all of this passion into tangible engagement with women's sport.
And it was pretty powerful seeing Pat Cummins, the Australian Test cricket leader, standing up and saying, I advocate for netball, I'm on board with these girls. So that, a really strong male role model empowering these women. Aisha, cultural change, it is such an important part of this conversation and where we want to get to. And you've been instrumental in setting up the culture of the AFLW program and how that comes in holistically with the Essendon Football Club and its many, many years of tradition. How have you gone about creating that unique culture?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time building our women's culture before our AFLW arrived. So we had a VFL women's program for 5 years before our AFLW licence was granted, and we really used that to be the foundation of preparing this football club for women. I think in regards to how we were successful in that was really seeing strong leadership from the top down. So a lot of male positions in those roles, from president, CEO, executive general manager of football, all male positions, but being extremely strong advocates and voices for our women's program. But it was what they were saying was backed up in their actions. So they did invest. They put the money into our VFLW program. They got, I guess, the foundations right so that when AFLW was knocking, we were so ready to bring the elite football to this club. I think in thinking about what it was like in our first season last year, there was some incredible moments in regards to how we integrated into the club. Our AFL men's program, as an example, welcomed us with open arms in terms of we had brand new players and the men's team got behind them. We had joint events to do meet and greets. All the men's players wrote letters welcoming the players that wore the same numbers as them. We had probably about 5 of our men's players come to training and support from a coaching and assistance point of view on field. So it's things like that that really make the women feel welcome and feel like they belong here. So that's something we'll continue to do here. But yeah, that's probably some of the foundational work that we did to prepare.
Incredible. I love that story about the letters. What a beautiful thing to do. Peter, we've touched on leadership with Aisha. What would you say has been a mistake you've made along your career and along your journey that has taught you some lessons and has really shaped the administrator that you are today?
I'm not sure we've got time today to go through all the mistakes that I've made as a leader, and it's probably as much reflecting on my experience with other leaders that I've had as well that has helped shape me, and the ones that I've liked and the ones that have made me thrive. So, what I probably used to do when I was a bit younger, and I'm sure many in the room are guilty of, being very hands-on. That's a bit of a female trait often, that you feel like you've got to know it all and be across it all. But I've become a much better leader by allowing my team to have the space to be autonomous, to allow them to thrive and to allow creativity. And it's also around diversity and employing, diversity within your teams, not trying to create mini-me's. In fact, quite the opposite, getting people that have diverse backgrounds and not even backgrounds that come from within. Before AFL, I worked in racing. Both of them, they're not things that I was, highly skilled at, but what I have brought to the table is diversity and different ideas around how to execute and not just the same way. Very much around letting my team thrive. Sure, I've got to be across things, but giving them enough space to thrive, and also, the old flirting, learning from failure. Again, no big, sure, we don't want to fail and we don't want to make mistakes, but when you do, the most important thing is around making sure you dissect what happened and how you can do it better next time. So it's actually making sure that people still have the confidence to be brave, and just, learn from mistakes and so forth. So that's probably, where I am at today.
Excellent, brilliant stuff. And I think we can all take away from that the delegating and wanting to do it all. It's an important thing. Taya, we all begin our careers with big dreams and big hopes, and you're obviously in a position of leadership at the moment. What would you tell your teenage self about your professional career to arm you with the tools you need?
I think for me, it's just about working hard and going after what you want and not being afraid to use your voice and ask for opportunities. I think sometimes that can feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm really grateful and I've been really lucky working in clubland across a few different codes, but it has been about, asking questions and asking for opportunities and, putting my best foot forward and not being afraid to do that. And I think sometimes, particularly when you're younger and you're coming up in your early stages of your career, being ambitious is a challenging space because you obviously want to be ambitious, but you want to do the right thing and, balancing how that's perceived. So I think for me, it's just making sure you remember to back yourself, try and surround yourself with other like-minded people that you can lean on because we don't have the answers all the time. So being able to, bounce things off a close group of friends or a mentor, I think is really important. Just really remembering that you can do anything if you put your mind to it and don't be afraid to ask.
Brilliant advice. Maddie, finally to you, leadership and what it means. Obviously an Essendon best and fairest winner, that comes with leadership within itself. You're setting the standard for your teammates. What does leadership mean to you?
Yeah, I think for me, I had to grow up really quick. When I sort of hit the AFLW, everything happened really fast for me and I kind of had to take a couple steps back before I could move forward, and I've probably found myself in a bit of a stagnant position in the middle part of my career, probably going into my third year. I was still only 20 and everything, like I said, happened really quickly for me and I didn't know how to deal with pressure. I didn't know how to deal with the title of potentially being a leader within the club at only 20. For me, just had to grow up really quickly, use the people around me, and I feel like, the beauty of AFLW and the beauty of playing football is you got a list of 30 girls and you can learn something different from every single person. So I think that's kind of guided me, but also I've got a real caring nature and a good balance in my life, and I think finding that outside of football has really guided me to find the love for football again. And obviously moving to Essendon was a big thing for me, and for me it was creating a culture that is empathetic, caring, but also playing good football at the same time. So building that balance on and off the field with a brand new team excited me. Did feel a little bit of pressure coming over and taking on a bit of a leadership role this year, but I've actually absolutely loved it. I've got Steph and Jack as well here, G and Bonnie, and I feel like I've been able to learn a lot off them, but kind of also just sit back and look at how awesome they lead, and if I can be a leader one day, I'd love to be someone like them.
And play with a smile on your face. Good luck for the rest of the AFLW season, hoping for big things for the Bombers girls for the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much. Everyone, if you can put your hands together for our fabulous speakers today.